Finally, inflation has gone down. Well, Rachel Reeves has been pushing up and pushing it up. Last month it was 3%. Now it's gone down slightly. According to the most recent data from the Office of National Statistics, the Consumer Prices Index has decreased from 3% in January to 2.8% in February. And on the surface, this is good news, especially for Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who's had a challenging spring statement to prepare and all this slow growth and budgetary restriction. However, the headline conceals a less reassuring reality, doesn't it? As in the case with so many economic figures. What caused the drop in inflation? The primary cause of the decline in inflation was an unforeseen element, the cost of clothing. In order to entice hesitant customers, women's clothing businesses apparently drastically reduced their prices after the January sales period, and for the first time in over 3 years, clothing and footwear had a 0.6% year-over-year decline. As a result, the CPI fell more precipitously than anticipated, exceeding the Bank of England's own prediction, as well as the City's 2.9% projection. And clothing is a very seasonal and erratic sector, so this drop barely amounts to structural improvement. In fact, core inflation, which doesn't include food and energy, only marginally decreased to 3.5%, while services inflation remains stubbornly at 5%. The Bank of England actually keeps an eye on these numbers, even if the newspapers don't. So, can the fall continue? And economists are wary. The ICAEW, Deutsche Bank, and the Pantheon Macroeconomics have all issued warnings that this decline could be the calm before the storm, and several financial strains are already anticipated for the spring and the summer. Energy costs are predicted to increase once more. In April, there will be increases to the national living wage and national insurance contributions. Additionally, President Trump's proposed tariff regime may trigger a fresh wave of inflationary pressures, further compounding the uncertainties in the world. And because of this, inflation may well return to 3.7% by autumn, and some analysts think it may even reach 4%, which is twice the Bank of England's objective of 2%. So, how do interest rates get affected? The Bank of England maintained interest rates at 4.5% last week and indicated that any reductions would be modest, notwithstanding the short-term respite. The markets are currently divided. The Bank of England is cautious, yet swaps data indicates 75% possibility of a rate drop in May. Its worry premature easing may allow wage price spirals to rekindle and inflation expectations to solidify. Bond markets have so far reacted favourably as investors factor in a more dovish forecast for interest rates. Gilt yields have decreased and the value of the pound has somewhat declined. Reeves' political options, well, this inflation decline, the timing of this is advantageous from a political standpoint, particularly as PMQs is coming up today. As Rachel Reeves makes her sombre spring statement, it provides her with a talking point, a little thread of hope. And the level of public borrowing is still high, and in January the UK economy dropped by 0.1%. It's anticipated that the OBR would reduce growth projections for this year from an already dismal 2% to only 1%. Additionally, Reeves has been constrained by her own budgetary regulations, by her own fiscal rules, which mandate that daily expenses be covered without taking on additional debt. So her options are therefore becoming more limited as inflation reduces. But Reeves has ruled out a return to austerity while also promising not to raise taxes. But the maths has to be done. There have to be cuts. And welfare measures that were predicted to save £5 billion now only bring in £3.4 billion. Spending on defence will increase by £2.2 billion, so something has to give. Not to be overlooked here is the human element. The fact that inflation has dropped to 2.8% is cold comfort to Liverpool pensioners. There's a man who was interviewed today called Malcolm Hindley. The cost of energy is increasing. Fuel payments for the winter have been discontinued for so many people. A lot of people worry about new welfare cuts, and then there's the threat to PIP. And although at a slower rate, rents are still rising at a rate of more than 8% annually, and despite declining inflation, mortgage rates, that wonderful gift donated to the country by Liz Truss, are still high, since they're based on base rate expectations rather than the headline CPI number. And the decrease in inflation this month really doesn't affect many people. That's the reality. I expect it to be bandied around at PMQs today, but it's not going to be that significant in reality. Certainly not significant as anything positive. So although the decrease in inflation in February might have some modest beneficial impact, it's really only temporary. And prices are still being driven up by domestic legislation, energy costs, international tariffs and salaries. And with good reason, the Bank of England is cautious. And despite the favourable timing, Rachel Reeves is still balancing her finances with a shaky safety net. And this is not the beginning of a new day. This is a false dawn.